I'm Anastasia, a fashion designer with over 20 years of experience and a sewing educator. And I'm really excited you're here to share another sewing adventure with me today. Welcome to Sewing Anastasia's 12 Days of Christmas. December 1st to the 12th, I will be putting out a new tutorial every single day. All of these tutorials are going to be about creating gifts that you can give this holiday. These are going to be super easy DIY gifts that you can make right at home. There's nothing better than getting and receiving DIY holiday gifts. Speaking of gifts, I am giving away a sewing machine this holiday. I'm giving away this brand new, beautiful Husqvarna Viking Jade 20 sewing machine. All you have to do is enter the giveaway, and the link is down below in the description with all of the details. This contest starts December 5th and goes through December 15th, and I will be picking a winner on December 20th. So tell all your friends and family and make sure you get your entries in. I cannot wait to read your post on what inspires you to sew. It is super easy to enter, and how amazing would it be to win a new sewing machine for Christmas, or you could even give it as a gift. And don't forget, all of the details are down below in the description for how to enter. And if you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing. And don't forget, I now teach sewing classes in my design studio in Chicago, Illinois, and I teach virtual lessons as well. So make sure you check those out at sewinganastasia.com. And today, on the 12 Days of Christmas, we are going to create a laptop case. I'm going to be creating the cover for my MacBook Pro, which is 13.3 inches. You can adjust this pattern that we're about to create though for any laptop. It doesn't matter what kind of laptop you have, you can adjust this pattern to fit your laptop. Supplies for the project are as follows. You're going to need some matching thread for your bias tape, which means you're going to need some bias tape. You're also going to need your scissors, and you're going to need some sort of closure for the front of the case. I'm going to be using a 4-piece snap, but you could use Velcro, you could use a hand sewing snap, you could use a button and a buttonhole, but you can use any sort of closure method that you would like. For this closure method specifically, I'm going to need the hole punch and the snap tool. But if you're not using that method for the closure, just make sure you have your closure ready. And you're going to need some really fun trim for the edge, or maybe you don't want some fun trim, but we're going to be putting some really fun trim on the edge of this laptop case. You're also going to be needing your vinyl Teflon foot if you're using vinyl for your case, which we are. And you're also going to need your pattern. I'm going to have this pattern available for download at sewinganastasia.com under digital downloads. Last but not least, you're going to need some fabric. You're going to need about a half yard of your outside fabric. I'm going to be using this orange vinyl. And you're also going to need an inside fabric. I'm going to be using this gray felt. And again, you need about a half yard of each. Or if you don't want to use vinyl, you can use any sort of fabric that you would like to use. The first step is going to be downloading your pattern and cutting it out. So here's my laptop case pattern. And next, we need to cut it out of the fabric. So I've already cut it out of my felt, which is my lining, and I've cut it out of the vinyl, which is going to be my outside self fabric. Now that we have both of these cut out, we're going to lay them on top of each other, and we're just going to stitch all the way around the edge to keep them together while we're working with them. And I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. So let's head over to the sewing machine and sew these together. So I'm going to put my vinyl on top of the felt, and I'm just going to be stitching these two layers together all the way around. I have my Teflon foot on, which is going to help me sew over the vinyl. It's going to make sure that my foot doesn't stick to the vinyl. And now I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge in just to keep these two layers together. And if you need tips on how to sew vinyl and how to make sure it's not sticking to your machine, I have a whole video with tips and tricks about how to sew vinyl. You don't even necessarily need a Teflon foot, so make sure you check it out. Now that we have these two layers sewn together, we're going to attach the snap. There's going to be a mark on your pattern for where to attach the snap, so we're going to mark that on our fabric. There's going to be a little spot at the curve up here, which I want you to mark. And then there's also going to be one way down at the other end. So we also mark that. And now we know exactly where we need to punch our holes. At this point, you can sew your snaps or your Velcro or whatever you're going to use to fasten this. Now I'm going to take my hole punch and punch out where I marked those spots. Just going to squeeze real hard, and then it's going to punch a hole in your vinyl. And now we're going to do the other side. Now I've got this one rolled up a bit and it's pushed into my gun here, and I'm going to go ahead and just squeeze it down. Okay, and now we've got a hole on the other side. Now we're ready to attach our snap, so grab your snap pieces and your snap tool. We're going to put this piece on the top, on the outside of our bag, push it through, and then we're going to take this piece here and put it on the back side. And then we're going to make sure that the pointy part of our snap tool is on the back here, and line it up with the hole in the snap, and then go ahead and squeeze. And now it's together, and you'll notice how it's squished down around the little piece, making it secure. Now we're going to put the piece in the other hole. So we're going to make sure that the concave one is on the outside and this little tubular one is on the back. So we're going to push that one up through the back. Okay. Now we're going to put the other one around it, squish it together, and now we're going to take our tool and we're going to lift it up and turn it to the other side of the tool. And now we're going to make sure that the pointy part of the tool is going to go into that little tubular part to squish it around to make it stay on. If it's hard to get this into your tool, you can always roll this up a little bit. Now that we have it lined up, we're just going to go ahead and squeeze. And there we go. It's on the back. This is what the back of the laptop case looks like right now. We have both of our snap pieces. Now that we have both the snaps on, it's time to attach some bias binding. The first thing we're going to do is attach the bias binding across the straight edge. So let's head over to the sewing machine and sew it down. We're going to attach the bias binding to the straight edge here. So I want you to open up your bias binding, and we are going to sew into the first groove on the bias binding, and make sure you're on your lining side. So that way we're going to be wrapping it around to the front side. Bias binding is a great way to finish your edges. So I've got everything lined up and I'm ready to sew this down. So just follow the groove that's in your bias binding. You can use that as a guide. When you get to the end, back stitch and cut. Now that we have one stitch in the binding, we're going to take it, wrap it around to the front, and now we're going to do an edge stitch right on the fold. Just make sure that the fold of your binding is covering the previous stitches that are there. So you're stitching right on the edge of the fold of this binding right here. Once you have it all lined up, let's stitch it down. When you get to the end, back stitch and cut. Now that we have the binding on, it's giving it a nice clean edge. Next, we're gonna lay the pattern on top of the lining side of the bag, and we're gonna mark the 4 notches that are on the pattern. So you're gonna have 2 notches here and 2 notches down here. And this is gonna help us fold it in half so that way we can sew the sides together. So I'm just gonna mark it with some chalk all the way around so that way when I remove it, I can see my little spots. So now I've got my 2 little spots here and here. And now I know exactly where I need to line these up. And since it's vinyl, you don't want a pin, so you want to go ahead and put a clip in it. And then let's line up this side and put a clip in it as well. And now once you have it clipped, we are just going to sew these 2 sides about 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch in. We just want them to stay together. because after we get the sides to stay together, we're gonna take a piece of bias binding and we're gonna finish the rest of the bag with the binding. So let's head over to the sewing machine and sew the sides together and then put the binding on. Make sure you backstitch or fix for your side seams that you're sewing. When you get to the end, backstitch and fix. And now let's sew the other side. I'm going to sew from the bottom up on this side just so I can keep the bulk of my project to the outside. Backstitch and fix and cut. Now that we have the satin bias binding on the front and our sides are sewn up, it's time to attach the binding around the outside of the laptop case. I'm going to be using a cotton binding for this one, so that way it's nice and sturdy. I'm going to open up my double fold bias binding and I'm going to extend it a little past the bottom so I can fold that in and make it clean later. Now what we're going to do is stitch in this first fold all the way around. Don't forget to back stitch or fix. Back stitch at the end and cut. Now that we have one side of the binding sewn down, we're going to need to sew down the other side of the binding. And you can see how nice this is just folding around the edge and the curves because it's bias binding. Now, if the edge of your seam is too thick and you don't think it's gonna come all the way over, maybe you sewed too thick, maybe the fabric's really thick, you can go ahead and chop off some of the fabric in your seam allowance so it's just a little bit easier to wrap around the edge. There we go, I think that's gonna help a lot. And now it lays just a little flatter and nicer on the edge. Before we start edge stitching the binding down, we have to fold in these ends. So fold it up so it's flush with the bag on the bottom. And now you can go ahead and fold it over. And now what we wanna do is very carefully edge stitch this bias binding down all the way around. Okay, let's do it. Don't forget to back stitch or fix. Make sure you're covering those stitches that are already there so they don't pop out. Now that we have the binding on the bag completely, inside and out, we are going to attach some fun trim around the flap. Now when we attach this really fun trim, I'm going to put it under the binding and then I'm just going to straight stitch it on in the very center of the binding, just around the curve at the top, just to add some extra fun. Now I'm going to work my way around the edge of the bag, attaching this trim. When you get to the end, backstitch or fix. The laptop case is finished. Check out how fun it is. I love the trim on the bottom and how it moves. It just gives it such an extra pizzazz. Obviously, if you didn't want to add the trim, you don't have to. It's just a little extra something. So let's check it out. So if we unsnap it, we've got the inside, which has a nice thick felt. So it makes it nice and durable and protects the laptop. We did the outside in the vinyl, which kind of makes it a little bit waterproof or water resistant as well. And the laptop fits in it perfectly. Check that out. So cute. I love it. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. I hope you had fun making a laptop case with me. If you have any questions about it, leave it down below and I will get back with you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, give it some applause, and leave a comment down below. I'd love to know what you thought about it. Also, don't forget, I'm giving away a sewing machine this month, and the giveaway starts December 5th and ends December 15th. So make sure you check that out. The link is down below on how to enter. So make sure you check that out. All the information is down below. Also, make sure you follow me on social media at Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and all those other fabulous sites so that way we can stay connected and creative together. And I would love to see your projects, so make sure you tag me in them. And don't forget, this laptop case is a part of the 12 Days of Christmas, so make sure you check out the playlist so you can see all the other gift-giving ideas. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!